My name is Delia Brown, and I'm 29 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've lived with a quiet, unspoken rule that no one ever bothered to explain to me, but everyone followed. I would always come second. Second in grades, second in praise, second in pride, and without question, second in my parents' hearts. Growing up, I didn't understand it at first. I thought families were supposed to be fair, that love adjusted itself naturally, like water finding its level. It took years, decades really, for me to understand that fairness had never been part of the equation. My older brother Leonard was the golden child. He was everything I wasn't allowed to be: talented, confident, loud in a way that filled rooms. My parents spoke about him the way people talk about miracles, like his existence alone justified every sacrifice they'd ever made. When relatives visited, his achievements were recited like scripture. When strangers asked about their children, his name came first, always first. Leonard could do no wrong. If I brought home a B on a test, my father would sigh and ask why I hadn't tried harder. If Leonard brought home the same grade, the teacher was clearly biased or incompetent. When I landed my first decent job, my mother asked if it was temporary, if I planned to aim higher someday. When Leonard landed a six-figure salary, they threw a dinner party. Not a celebration, an event. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, washing dishes while they toasted him in the living room. My name wasn't mentioned once. That was the pattern. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. Arguing only made things worse. Crying made me dramatic. Silence, I learned, was safer. So I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I nodded when comparisons were made. I swallowed resentment so often it became a reflex. By my late 20s, I had built a life that existed almost entirely outside my family's orbit. I paid my own bills. I rented my own apartment. I kept my space clean, my routines predictable. There was comfort in independence. Comfort in knowing that if something fell apart, it would be my responsibility and mine alone. I even had a boyfriend. He was steady, patient, the kind of man who noticed details most people overlooked. He noticed how my shoulders tensed before family dinners, how my voice flattened when I talked about Leonard. He never pushed me to explain. He didn't need to. But I rarely talked about him around my parents. Anything good in my life had a way of being diminished, or worse, compared. I wasn't willing to hand them something else to measure and dismiss. For a while, I thought I had figured out how to survive them. Then everything changed. Leonard went bankrupt. At first, I didn't believe it. Leonard didn't fail. Failure was something that happened to people like me, people who didn't aim high enough, people who played it safe. But one night, he showed up at my apartment with a duffel bag and a look I had never seen on his face before. Fear. The apartment he bragged about was gone. The lifestyle he flaunted had collapsed. The savings my parents assumed he still had didn't exist. He didn't explain much. He didn't have to. I just need a place to crash, he said. Short term. I told myself I didn't have a choice. I couldn't leave him homeless. Not really. Not even after everything. There was a part of me, small, stubborn, and stupid, that still believed loyalty meant something. That being the bigger person would eventually count. So I let him stay. Leonard slept on my couch, ate my food, used my utilities like they were his. He promised it was temporary. Promised he was figuring things out. Promised he'd start looking for work once he cleared his head. Weeks passed, then months. Leonard didn't look for a job. He didn't contribute financially. He didn't even pretend to try. Most days, he stayed on the couch, scrolling on his phone, talking about how depressed he was, how overwhelmed, how unfair life had been to him. Meanwhile, I paid for everything. Rent, groceries, utilities. I even loaned him money for a used car because he said people took you more seriously if you had one. I didn't argue. I transferred the money and put the car in my name, telling myself it was just another temporary solution. What my parents didn't know was any of it. Leonard made sure of that. To them, he was still thriving, still successful, still the son they adored. He barely called, always claiming he was busy, carefully maintaining the illusion they preferred over reality. When my mother mentioned him, her voice still carried pride. When my father spoke about him, it was with certainty. And me? I was still the disappointment, still the one who never quite measured up, still second. At the time, I thought my silence was kindness. I thought I was protecting him, protecting my parents, keeping the peace. I didn't realize I was only delaying the inevitable, because silence doesn't erase truth. It just waits. And Thanksgiving was coming. Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always followed the same rhythm. The same cramped dining table. The same dry jokes my father repeated every year. The same unspoken hierarchy that everyone pretended not to notice. That year, I felt it the moment I stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted turkey and nostalgia, but beneath it was something sharper, anticipation, the kind that made my shoulders tighten and my jaw ache before a single word had been spoken. Leonard hadn't arrived yet. My mother kept glancing at the clock, irritation creeping into her expression. He said he'd be here by now, she muttered, rearranging the napkins for the third time. I said nothing. Leonard was always late. It was part of his entrance. Being expected was never enough. He needed to be awaited. When his car finally pulled up, my mother rushed to the window. There he is. He parked directly in front of the house, slow and deliberate. The car I paid for. I watched from the doorway as he stepped out, confidence sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. He straightened his jacket, ran a hand through his hair, and smiled before he even opened the door. Sorry I'm late, he said brightly, as if the room hadn't been holding its breath for him. Traffic was insane. My mother hugged him like he'd returned from war. We were worried. I told you, he laughed. I've got a lot going on. We sat down to eat soon after. Plates were passed, wine poured, and just like that, the spotlight shifted to Leonard. So, my mother began, barely waiting for him to take a bite. How's work going? Busy, Leonard replied smoothly. Really busy. My father leaned forward. Still investing? Of course, Leonard said. Had to downsize a bit for a new opportunity, but that's just part of the process. Short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. My uncle nodded approvingly. That's how winners think. I stared at my plate, my appetite evaporating. He wasn't just lying. He was performing. Every word landed exactly where he wanted it to. Every smile reinforced the version of him they already believed in. I could practically see the image, successful, composed, untouchable, hovering above the table like a ghost. Then my father turned to me. And you, Delia, he said, swirling his wine. Still at the same job? I nodded. Yes. He smiled, not kindly. Well, I guess someone has to come in second. The table erupted. My mother laughed. My uncle laughed. Even my cousin covered her mouth, trying to hide a grin. Leonard laughed the hardest. Something inside me finally broke, not loudly, not dramatically. It snapped quietly, like a thread pulled too tight for too long. I set my fork down. Okay, I said, standing up. The laughter stopped. I think Leonard's moving out of my apartment tomorrow, I continued, my voice steady. Silence crashed over the table. My mother blinked. What? I crossed my arms. Since he's doing so well, he obviously doesn't need my couch anymore. He can move in with you. All eyes turned to Leonard. The color drained from his face. Delia, come on, he laughed nervously. Stop joking. I'm not joking. I turned to my parents. Your successful son has been living with me for months, eating my food, driving a car I paid for, because he's broke. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's expression hardened. Leonard opened his mouth, then closed it. Is that true? My father asked slowly. Leonard swallowed. Dad, it's complicated. I took a step closer. Is it? Do you have your own place? Silence. Do you pay rent? More silence. Do you even buy your own toilet paper? Leonard's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. He's been lying to you, I said, and I let him, even though I paid for everything while he sat around doing nothing. The room felt like it was shrinking. My father pushed back his chair and stood. You've been living off your sister while letting us believe you were still successful? My grandmother, quiet until now, shook her head. Shameful. Leonard flinched. That word hurt him more than anything I'd said. I grabbed my jacket. You can all figure this out. I'm done. I walked out without waiting for permission. I sat in my car for a long time before driving. My hands were shaking, but for the first time, it wasn't fear. It was relief. I thought that was the end. I thought the truth had finally done its job. I had no idea what Leonard would do next to protect his image. I didn't go straight home after I left my parents' house. I drove. No destination, no music, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing filling the car. The city lights blurred past my windshield, red and white streaks that felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my own life for a moment and was watching it from somewhere else. I kept replaying the laughter. Not my father's joke, not Leonard's lies. The way everyone laughed with him. By the time I finally pulled into my apartment complex, my chest felt hollow. Not angry, not sad, just empty, like something vital had finally drained out of me. The lights were on inside. That should have been my first warning. I unlocked the door, barely stepping inside before it slammed shut behind me. What the hell is wrong with you? Leonard's voice was sharp, slurred at the edges. I turned slowly. He was standing in the living room, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, the smell of alcohol heavy in the air. My apartment, my safe place, felt instantly smaller. I set my keys down and walked past him to the fridge. "I'm not in the mood, Leonard," I said calmly, pulling out a beer. "You barely managed to fix what you did tonight," he snapped, following me. "Do you have any idea what you pulled?" I paused. "Fix?" I repeated. "Yes, Delia," he said, voice rising. "You humiliated me. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I took a sip, then turned to face him. "You did that yourself." "No," he shot back. "I fixed it. I told them you were jealous, that you made everything up because you couldn't stand that I was more successful than you." I stared at him, disbelief curling into something colder. "You lied again?" "I had no choice," he snapped. "Mom was freaking out. Dad was furious. I had to say something." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You really are unbelievable." "You didn't have to say anything," he continued. "Everything was fine before you opened your mouth." "Fine for who?" I asked quietly. "For me," he said without hesitation. "They've always liked me more. You just couldn't stand that." That was the moment it finally clicked. This wasn't desperation. This was entitlement. "They don't like you," I said. "They like the version of you sell them. And the second they saw the truth, you panicked." "They didn't turn on me," he scoffed. "I fixed it." Right on cue, my phone rang. "Mom!" I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Leonard smirked. "Go ahead, pick it up," I answered. "Why would you lie like that?" my mother demanded. "Do you know how humiliating that was for your brother?" "Because it's true," I said through clenched teeth. "Leonard already explained everything," she cut in. "He said you were jealous, that you let your emotions get the best of you." I closed my eyes. There it was, the choice. After the call ended, I looked at Leonard. "I'm selling the car." His expression shifted instantly, from smug to panicked. "You can't." "It's in my name," I said. "I paid for it." "Delia, don't do this," he said quickly. "You're being emotional." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm being done." I pulled out my phone and listed the car right in front of him. He stared at the screen, his breathing shallow. "You can't just take it." "It was never yours." He grabbed his duffel bag, pacing toward the door. He hesitated, waiting, hoping I'd stop him. I didn't. The door closed behind him with a final, quiet click. I thought that was it. I was wrong. The next afternoon, my dad called. "Delia, we need you to come over. It's about Leonard." When I arrived, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Leonard was slumped in a chair, arms crossed, already preparing his next performance. "She's obsessed with my ex-girlfriend," he blurted suddenly. "That's why she did all this." I laughed. "That's insane." My mother frowned, uncertainty flickering. I pulled up the car sale confirmation and handed my phone to my dad. The room went silent. Even my cousin shook her head. My father sighed deeply. "Jesus Christ, Leonard." For once, there was nothing Leonard could say. Later, at my mother's birthday, the tables turned completely. When someone asked Leonard about work, he stumbled through an excuse until my grandmother cut in. "He's unemployed." Silence. Then laughter. Not kind, not warm. Cruel. Within weeks, Leonard was working fast food. My parents stopped bragging. They started complaining. The golden child had become a burden. And suddenly, I was treated with respect. Not because they changed, but because they lost their favorite. Do I forgive them? No. They didn't grow. They just adjusted. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be seen. And I finally understood something that brought me peace. Being second was never the problem. Believing it was.